The rain had stopped just before dawn, leaving the jungles soaked and steaming. Gabriel Torres leaned against the rail of the riverboat, staring at the endless green stretching on both sides of the Amazon. He had been on dozens of assignments before, but none had felt quite like this. The river was too wide, the forest too alive. He could almost feel it watching him. His contract was simple on paper: investigate reports of illegal deforestation at the edge of the Tapajos Reserve. But the government's wording had been deliberately vague. Some local papers whispered about sabotage, others about thugs hired by rival companies. And among the indigenous communities, the talk was stranger still. Stories about a beast house in the forest, something that made men and animals work like slaves to build its nest. Gabriel had laughed the first time he heard it, then quickly stopped. The way the tribesmen had looked at him, flat, serious eyes, made it hard to dismiss. The boat bumped against a muddy dock, snapping him out of his thoughts. A white pickup truck waited on shore. The man leaning against it waved lazily, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "Torres?" the man called. "Yeah," Gabriel answered, slinging his pack over his shoulder. The man was younger than Gabriel expected, maybe early 30s. Thick black hair, polo shirt tucked into jeans, boots polished to a dull shine. He looked more like a salesman than a foreman. "Rafael Duarte," he said, shaking Gabriel's hand with a firm, businesslike grip. "Company assigned me to babysit you. Hope you're not the type who complains about the heat." Gabriel smirked. "If I was, I'd be in Lisbon right now, not here." Rafael grinned. "Good, let's get going. The old man's waiting." They drove inland, the road little more than a scar carved through the trees. Chains of vines dripped across the path, and the air smelled of wet earth and diesel. Gabriel sat in silence, jotting quick notes in his field book. Recent clearings, signs of vehicle traffic, the angle of fallen trees. He was trained to notice what didn't belong, but here everything looked wrong. After an hour, the truck pulled into a small clearing. A shack stood there, patched together from corrugated metal and weathered wood. Beside it, a man sat sharpening a machete, his movements steady and practiced. "This is Yoel," Rafael said. "Forest ranger. Lives out here. Knows every root and stone." Yoel lifted his head. His face was creased like old leather, eyes dark and unreadable. He didn't offer a hand, only a nod. "You're the scientist," he said flatly. "Ecologist," Gabriel corrected gently. "Names don't matter. You're here to see the damage. But remember something, Senor. Not all scars on the land are made by men." Gabriel waited for a smile, some hint that the old man was joking, but Yuan's expression never shifted. "Don't mind him," Rafael muttered. "He's been out here too long. Thinks the trees talk to him at night." "They do," Yuan said without looking up. The blade of his machete caught a glint of sun. "And if you hear them calling, you don't answer." The silence stretched. Somewhere in the canopy, a howler monkey gave a low, guttural cry. Gabriel cleared his throat. "Then let's start with the site. I want to see where these so-called loggers have been working." Raphael's grin returned, quick and thin. "You'll see it. Believe me, you'll see it." They set out after noon, moving deeper into the forest on foot. João led the way with the ease of a man who had walked the same path his entire life. His boots barely made a sound. Raphael trailed behind him, lighting another cigarette, while Gabriel tried to keep pace, scribbling down every detail. Claw marks on a tree trunk, a scatter of bones near a stream, birds that went suddenly quiet as they passed. The deeper they went, the more Gabriel felt the weight of the forest pressing against his ribs. It wasn't just the humidity or the silence, it was the sense of something vast, coiled, waiting. By the time they reached the edge of the clearing, the sun was sinking, staining the sky blood orange through the canopy. Gabriel stopped in his tracks. Before him stretched a wasteland of splintered trees and churned mud, as if a storm had ripped through and then thought better of it, leaving chaos half-finished. And in the center of the devastation was something he could not immediately name. It rose 10 feet high, sprawling wider than a truck. A mound of branches, trunks, vines, and bones, tangled together with unsettling precision. It was not random. It was not natural. It was a house, a nest. Yuan whispered something in Tupi under his breath and crossed himself. Raphael only whistled low, shaking his head. Gabriel swallowed hard, his pen frozen above the page. This was no logging site. It was something else entirely. Gabriel had studied enough nests in his career to know the patterns of nature. Weaver birds spun orbs, termites built towers, ants carved tunnels in the dirt. But nothing in his training could explain the structure before him. The mound was too deliberate. The trunks had been snapped, not cut, wedged together with vines twisted like rope. Shards of bone jutted from the seams, some animal, some, he thought uneasily, too long, too human. "Jesus," Gabriel muttered. Huon didn't speak. He knelt at the edge of the clearing, pressing his palm into the churned soil as if reading something hidden beneath. When he finally stood, his expression was carved in stone. "They've been working nights," he said. "They?" Gabriel asked. "The forest," Huon replied simply. Raphael rolled his eyes. "Don't start with that mystic crap again. It's probably squatters or hunters building some kind of hide." Gabriel crouched near the mound, brushing mud from a piece of wood. The grain was polished smooth, as though countless hands or claws had worn it down. He reached to collect a sample, but Huo grabbed his wrist sharply. "Don't touch it." "Why not?" "Because it remembers," Huo said. His grip loosened, but his eyes burned with a strange intensity. Gabriel was about to press further when a noise rippled through the trees. Not the wind, not animals, a rhythm. Knock. Pause. Knock. All three men froze. The sound came again, steady as a hammer but slower, heavier. It seemed to come from the mound itself. Raphael cursed under his breath, flicked his cigarette into the dirt, and forced a laugh. Probably settling. Wood shifts when it dries. But Gabriel had heard shifting wood before, and this was different. Each thud reverberated like something inside was testing the walls. The forest fell silent afterward, too silent. No insects, no birds. The air felt thick, damp, close to suffocating. "Let's circle the site," Gabriel said finally. His voice was low, almost a whisper. They moved cautiously along the perimeter. Gabriel kept notes, marking the unnatural absence of tracks. No chainsaw marks, no tire treads, no human refuse. Whoever or whatever had built this, they had cleaned as they worked. "Look here," Huon said suddenly. He pointed to a tree a few yards away. The bark was stripped in long, parallel lines, deep as knife cuts. Sap still wept from the wounds. Claw marks. Gabriel leaned in. The grooves were wider apart than any jaguar he'd seen. Whatever left them had paws the size of dinner plates. He scribbled, heart racing. "Too wide for any known predator." Huon's eyes met his. "It is not predator, it is builder." The words unsettled Gabriel more than the marks themselves. By late afternoon, the humidity thickened into a haze. Sweat glued Gabriel's shirt to his back. His notebook was damp, the pages curling. Still, he couldn't stop writing. Details of the mound, the claw marks, the strange hush in the trees. Data was an anchor. It kept him from sliding into the unease that Yuan seemed to wear like a second skin. They stopped to rest near a fallen log. Yuan sat with his machete across his knees, staring into the brush. Raphael leaned against a trunk, lighting another cigarette, as if smoke could keep the unease away. "Tell me something," Gabriel said to the ranger. "You've lived here all your life. What do the locals call that thing?" Yuan hesitated. His gaze flicked to the mound, then back. "A casa besta," Gabriel translated automatically. "The beast's house?" João nodded. It builds, always builds. Men hear it, men follow, and then they do not come back. Raphael snorted. Superstition. You scare yourself with bedtime stories. But Gabriel saw the old man's hands. They trembled slightly, though his face stayed calm. The conversation ended when João rose abruptly, machete ready, his head tilted, listening. Gabriel followed his gaze. The forest moved, not the usual sway of branches. Shadows shifted between the trees, too quick, too silent. For a moment Gabriel thought he saw a shape, a hunched figure crawling low to the ground, limbs jointed wrong. But when he blinked, it was gone. Time to leave, João said. They didn't argue. The walk back to the shack was tense, each step accompanied by the sense of unseen eyes. When they finally reached the clearing, night had already crept in, dragging the heat with it. Inside the shack, Raphael slammed the bolt across the door and forced a laugh. Well, that was fun. Tomorrow, we burn it down. Problem solved. João didn't sit. He stood by the window, staring out into the dark. The forest does not burn, he said softly. It waits. Gabriel lay awake long after the others, his notebook open beside him. He could still hear it, the slow, deliberate knocking from the mound. Knock, pause, knock. Not wood shifting, not echo. An invitation. The next morning broke with a haze that clung low to the ground, as if the jungle had pulled a veil across itself. Gabriel woke groggy, his notebook still open at his side. The knocking from the night before had stopped, but the silence pressed heavier than sound ever could. Raphael was already outside, pacing, cigarette clenched between his teeth. João stood a few yards off, speaking low in Portuguese to the trees, as though the forest might answer back. Gabriel splashed water on his face from a tin basin. We need samples, he said. His voice sounded thinner than he intended. If this is a new species of social insect, or even, hell, even some undocumented primate behavior, it has to be recorded. Raphael exhaled smoke. Or we can torch it and go home. We can't just destroy it, Gabriel snapped, more forcefully than he felt. Not before we know what it is. João turned, eyes shadowed. Knowledge will not save you. But he didn't argue further. He simply adjusted the strap of his machete and waited. The walk back to the mound was worse in daylight. Gabriel had expected the sun to burn away his unease, but it didn't. The air felt thicker, as though they were walking underwater. The closer they drew, the more Gabriel noticed the details. Trees leaning unnaturally inward. Vines spiraled like no vine should, the smell of damp rot clinging to his skin. When they stepped into the clearing, the mound looked different. Larger. Gabriel froze, notebook clutched in his hand. He knew the human mind often exaggerated size, but this was no illusion. Overnight, the structure had grown. New branches woven in, fresh mud plastered along the base, the bones repositioned like ornaments. Christ, Raphael muttered. It's alive. Gabriel moved closer, fighting the pulse hammering at his temples. He took photos, sketched quickly, tried to anchor the dread into data. The mound wasn't just built, it was being maintained. Then João stiffened, his machete lifted a fraction. Listen. At first Gabriel heard nothing. Then, faint but rising, the scrape of movement inside. Not one creature, many. Crawling, shifting, dragging. The mound knocked once, and then the forest answered. From every direction came a chorus of sound. Branches breaking, leaves thrashing, claws against bark. Gabriel's chest tightened as he saw them. Capuchin monkeys scrambling toward the clearing, eyes wide, lips peeled back in silent snarls. Birds wheeled overhead, not in random panic but in formation, circling low. Even the insects swarmed in unnatural clouds, a black halo around the mound. They're protecting it, Gabriel whispered. Raphael cursed, backing up. No, I'm done with this. We burn it now. He fumbled with the lighter in his pocket. Before Gabriel could stop him, João grabbed Raphael's arm. Fire won't work, You'll only call it closer. Raphael shoved him off. Get out of my way, old man. But then the forest itself seemed to shudder. The monkeys descended, dropping onto branches so close Gabriel could see the whites of their eyes. They weren't shrieking. They weren't warning. They were waiting. Gabriel stumbled back, breath ragged. He thought he saw movement at the mound's opening, a shadow within shadows, a suggestion of something massive shifting just beyond sight. His stomach turned, his legs locked, and then he heard it. Not knocking this time. A voice. It wasn't speech, not exactly, but a rhythm that wormed into his thoughts, urging, calling. His body moved before his mind caught up. One step forward, then another, his notebook slipping from his hand. Gabriel! Raphael's voice cut through the haze. He felt a hand yank him backward. The trance snapped, leaving him gasping. He turned. Joan's face was pale, his grip iron tight on Gabriel's wrist. It wants you, Joan said. Gabriel could still hear the rhythm in his skull, like the echo of a heartbeat not his own. He pulled free, staggered to his knees, bile rising in his throat. Raphael's lighter clicked, flame flaring. He strode toward the mound. The monkeys leapt as one. Screams filled the clearing. Gabriel barely had time to register, Raphael vanishing under a swarm of teeth and claws before Joan dragged him away. They ran, branches tearing at their faces, the forest alive with movement. Gabriel risked one glance back, long enough to see the mound pulse, the vines tightening as if drawing nourishment from the chaos. They didn't stop until the shack was in sight. Raphael was gone. Gabriel collapsed to the floor inside, shaking, sweat stinging his eyes. Joan barred the door, shoulders heaving. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Gabriel whispered, "It's growing, and it's feeding." Joan didn't look at him. He only stared out the window into the suffocating green, lips moving in a prayer Gabriel couldn't understand, and beneath it all the rhythm continued. Knock, pause, knock, inside his skull. Night returned with the weight of a stone. The shack's thin walls offered no comfort, only the illusion of shelter. Gabriel sat hunched on his cot, shirt damp with sweat, notebook untouched on the floor. His mind still reeled with images of Raphael being dragged under by those monkeys, his scream cut short like a snapped wire. Joan hadn't spoken for hours. He sat by the doorway, machete across his knees, whispering prayers so low they dissolved into the crackle of the lantern. Gabriel wanted to ask him what God he was addressing, but the words dried up in his throat. Then, as the lantern sputtered, the sound returned. Knock, silence, knock. But this time it wasn't distant, not muffled by trees or dirt. The sound came from beneath the shack itself, rattling the floorboards under their boots. Joan froze mid-prayer, his lips parted, eyes wide. It has found us. Before Gabriel could move, the boards bulged upward as though something massive pressed from below. Dust sifted down. The lantern guttered and died, plunging the room into a gloom broken only by moonlight leaking through the cracks. Don't answer it, Joan hissed. His grip tightened on the machete. No matter what you hear. But the knocking grew louder, faster, until it became a pounding heartbeat that filled Gabriel's chest. He couldn't sit still. He rose, stumbling toward the door, and when Joan grabbed his arm, he wrenched free, strength he didn't know he had surging through him. Outside, the forest shimmered with pale light. The mound had grown taller still, breaching the canopy, a grotesque spire of bone and vine. And from its openings spilled a glow that wasn't firelight, wasn't natural at all. Gabriel felt it pulling him. Don't look, Joan shouted behind him, but Gabriel was already moving, feet dragging through the mud, body obeying something deeper than will. The jungle seemed to part for him. Monkeys watched from the branches, their heads turning in unison as he passed. Snakes hung still from the trees, eyes reflecting the same sickly glow. The air pulsed with rhythm, Knock, 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 that no longer sounded external but throbbed inside his skull. When he reached the base of the mound, the vines shifted aside like curtains. An entrance yawned before him. He stepped inside. The air was damp, thick with the stench of rot and honey. The walls glistened as though alive, woven of branches fused with sinew. Insects crawled through the lattice, their legs ticking in time with the heartbeat that had claimed him. At the chamber's center stood a figure. Not beast, not man, something caught between. Its body was tall, stooped under the weight of its own structure, skin mottled like bark, bones protruding at angles that seemed designed rather than grown. Its face was not a face at all, but a mask of shifting cavities that opened and closed like mouths searching for breath. Gabriel couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. His legs bent of their own accord, lowering him to the ground. A voice filled the chamber. You came. It wasn't sound. It was thought, carved into him like a knife. He clutched his head, but the words swarmed inside, undeniable. You build. You carry. You finish what we began. Visions crashed through him. Cities half-finished, scaffolds abandoned, staircases ending midair. All the structures men had started and never completed, each one a husk echoing the same rhythm. He realized with horror. The knocking wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. The creature reached forward, claws long as machetes, not to strike but to offer. From its chest cavity spilled a shard of bone, pale and sharp, dripping with resin. It pulsed like a heart. Gabriel's hand lifted without command. He wanted to take it. Needed to. His fingertips brushed the bone. A shout shattered the trance. Yuan stood at the entrance, lantern blazing, face fierce with desperation. Gabriel, don't touch it. The light flared across the chamber. For a blink, the creature recoiled, its shape twisting, smoke rising where the flame touched. The spell broke. Gabriel gasped, stumbling back, hand empty. The walls shuddered. The mound roared, not with a mouth but with every root and bone vibrating at once. Insects poured from the cracks, wings beating, mandibles snapping. Yuan grabbed Gabriel's arm and hauled him toward the exit. They ran, the tunnel collapsing behind them, vines slashing like whips. The lantern sputtered, then burst, filling the air with smoke and fire. They spilled into the clearing just as the mound convulsed. Branches tore free, bones snapping like rifles. A shape heaved upward within, too vast to emerge, but awake now, fully awake. The ground buckled. Trees toppled outward like grass before a storm. Yuan dragged Gabriel into the forest, shouting prayers into the night. Gabriel's ears rang with the sound, but beneath it, louder still, was the voice he couldn't silence. You are ours now. By dawn, the jungle looked like it had been chewed apart. Trees leaned at broken angles, the soil cracked and smoking where roots had been ripped from the ground. Gabriel staggered beside Yuan along a half-buried trail, his shirt torn, skin streaked with mud and blood. Neither spoke. Their breaths were shallow, as if words themselves would draw the thing's attention again. Hours blurred. The sky changed from gray to white, then to the bruised colors of late afternoon. They reached the river at last, its waters swollen and fast, but even there safety felt like an illusion. Gabriel sat on a rock, head in his hands, listening to the current. Beneath its rush he swore he could still hear it, that steady rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. Yuan crouched nearby, face hollow, eyes fixed on the far bank. You felt it too, he said flatly. Not a question, a fact. It touched you. Gabriel didn't answer. His hands still tingled from where he'd almost taken the shard of bone. His dreams the night before, no, not dreams, visions, had shown scaffolds rising, bridges building themselves, towers climbing toward unfinished skies. He didn't tell Zhuang, he couldn't. Instead, he asked, what happens now? Zhuang spit into the dirt, a bitter sound. Now it waits. That's what it does. It waits until you carry it forward. That is the curse. No fire, no blade can kill it. It only passes on. Gabriel laughed once, sharp and broken. Passes on? To me? Yuan looked at him then, really looked, and Gabriel knew the answer before the man spoke. Night fell again before they could find a boat. Yuan dozed against the roots of a fig tree, lantern dim at his side. Gabriel sat awake, staring at the water, and in its black surface he saw them. Outlines of windows and doors, walls stacked on walls, rising from the reflection like a city submerged. He blinked hard, but the vision stayed. Something inside him shifted, quiet but permanent. When rescue finally came, missionaries traveling upriver, they found Gabriel alone. Yuan was gone, machete left stuck in the earth like a gravestone. Gabriel claimed he didn't know where the man had gone, and the lie slid too easily from his tongue. Weeks later, back in Manaus, Gabriel filed his report. He wrote of structural collapse, aggressive wildlife, and the deaths of his colleagues. He left out the mound. He left out the creature. He left out the knocking that still kept him awake at night. But in the margins of his notebook, private pages he told himself were for research, he began to sketch. First vines, then lattices of bone, then staircases that led nowhere. Each drawing grew more intricate, more complete, until his hands ached and still he couldn't stop. One night, alone in his rented room, he woke to find he had drawn a door. Perfectly measured, perfectly proportioned. His pencil hovered at the threshold, waiting. The knock came again, soft, patient. From the other side, he dropped the pencil, heart pounding, but his body leaned forward, hungry to finish what he had started. The sound didn't stop. Knock, knock, knock. In the morning, the room would look ordinary again. The paper crumpled on the desk. The pencil rolled under the bed. But every structure Gabriel passed, unfinished bridges, empty high-rises, even half-built homes along the river, seemed to breathe with the same pulse. The house was never gone. It was everywhere. It was waiting for him to finish it. And deep in the jungle, where the mound still rose like a wound, vines crept higher. The spire stretched taller, wider, as if fed by his every thought, his every sketch. The legend would grow. Travelers would vanish. And someday soon, someone else would hear the knocking. The house would never end.